Well, sure, but the real thing they need to do is apologize to Jim Caldwell because he was doing what they needed him to do. He was winning 9 games a season on average in 4 seasons. By the way, an African-American head coach who was fired because 9 wins wasn't enough because 2 playoff appearances in 4 years for a team that hasn't won they've won 1 playoff game in 60 years. It is the least talked about record of futility in sports. 1 playoff win in 60 years. And this coach comes in, and in 4 seasons, he gets you to playoffs half the time. Now, no, you don't win any playoff games, but you know what? You know how you start winning playoff games? Keep getting to the playoffs. You'll start to win some playoff games. He averaged 9 wins a season, 2 playoff appearances in 4 years, African-American coach. Fired. Let go, because 9 wins wasn't enough. They bring in a coach that's not African-American. By the way, Stephen A., that's possible. You can have a black coach and you could have a white coach who's a better fit or a better coach and you can hire him, but that's not the case, is it? They've gotten much worse. They didn't just get a little worse. They lost, 12, 13 games last year? They got much worse. So, yeah, you fire a guy after 4 measly seasons for succeeding for a franchise that never does? You could apologize to the fan base for hiring Matt Patricia if you want to, but apologize for Jim Caldwell for letting a successful coach go.
Here's where it's not a matter of disagreeing, Max. Here's what I would tell you. I think that you're being entirely too soft and too kind. I don't think they owe Jim Caldwell an apology. I think they owe the city of Detroit, Michigan, the state of Michigan, the National Football League, and the American public an apology for being the Detroit Lions. They have been systematically pathetic on every level, and it has spanned decades. Do you understand that the Detroit Lions haven't been relevant since Barry Sanders was running the football for them? That's how bad they have been. I mean, obviously, Calvin Johnson, Megatron, had to retire, and we hope that he'll end up in the Hall of Fame because he was that much of a big-time stud. But even back then, they weren't winning any playoff games. We know that Matthew Stafford is not a scrub. He's had more comeback wins than a lot of quarterbacks in the National Football League. But somehow, some way, playing for the Detroit Lions contaminates you. You're Matt Patricia. You're like 13, 27, and 1 as the head coach. You've been absolutely horrendous. He should have been lost the job. He should have been brought back this year as the head coach of the franchise because we know they weren't going in a forward direction. And then when you look at the pipeline, certainly Jim Caldwell should not have been fired. We understand that, particularly considering what Matt Patricia has done. My attitude is, though, if you're going to let go of Jim Caldwell, why not let him go? Because you want a more offensive-minded coach and a guy like Eric Bieniemy, who's number 1 on everybody's list in terms of being on a hot list to be a head coach in the National Football League. This man spearheaded the number 1 offense, but even before Patrick Mahomes was wreaking havoc for the Kansas City Chiefs, he had Alex Smith as his quarterback. They weren't scrubs. So I look at Eric Bieniemy and what he's bringing to the table right now and what he's brought to the table the last few years. I think about Jim Caldwell again, along with a slew of other coaches, and I think a lot of it is worth consideration. Unfortunately, you're the Detroit Lions. You have been historically bad with your decision makings. So you could bring up that point about Jim Caldwell, and I'm in no position to disagree because obviously Jim Caldwell compared to Matt Patricia is really no comparison. It's an insult. But in the end, whether it's the Pittsburgh Steelers finding the Mike Tomlins of the world, whether it's the Green Bay Packers finding the Matt LaFleurs of the world, you can go into the coordinated ranks, or you can simply look at somebody who happens to be an African-American and very elite at what he's been doing in Kansas City with Eric Bieniemy, kill 2 birds with 1 stone and go that route. Detroit doesn't know what to do. They don't know what they've been doing. They've been a national embarrassment. And once again, here we are watching them, forced to watch them on Thanksgiving Day at noon because obviously, it's the only football game that's taking place, and we love our football. So they get our attention by default when they've done absolutely positively nothing to be worthy of it or to deserve it. It's pretty damn sad. It ain't about Caldwell, though. It's about their organization and what they have historically been.
I think it.
Max, can I jump in?
I think it is about Caldwell. Like, I understand why.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Molly. No,
I was just going to say, you can add to Caldwell if you want to, but I wanted to talk about Matthew Stafford because you have praised him before. He is a solid quarterback. Do you think at this point they've wasted his career and he should just demand a trade?
Yeah, sure. Matthew Stafford, if I were him, I'd want to get out of there. I think Stafford looked like he had top 5 talent. I don't think his career has played out that way. I've never considered him a top 5 quarterback. So maybe we just misjudged the overall package of Matthew Stafford. However, we see, as Stephen A. said, two of the greats that we've ever seen, like maybe the best back you've ever seen if you're, under 60 years old, in Barry Sanders, retires at 30, and Calvin Johnson, an all-time great, at 30. Both probably have something to do with the fact they're in a situation where you're not going to win, you don't have a lot of hope, and it's a tough game to play under those circumstances, right? Maybe it would have worked out a little differently and their careers wouldn't have been wasted in that way had they, and maybe the same thing happened to Stafford, though I think he's shown he's not Calvin Johnson or Barry Sanders for his position. But I want to say something about Caldwell, Stephen A. It's one thing to be Marvin Lewis, right? We talk about African-American coaches, how hard it is to get the job, and then you got to keep it, right? Marvin Lewis, you were right. You're like, it's not that he's bad. It's that you've had a long time to win, and you have not been able to win in the playoffs. This dude, Caldwell, had the job for 4 seasons. He got to 2 playoff games. No, he didn't win any, but guess what? If you get to 2 and 4, I'm going to say you're going to get to 4 and 8, and I'll bet you'll win one of those. There's a franchise that never wins in the playoffs. And so I understand the impulse to get, Belichick tree, Belichick coaching tree. Let's grab Patricia, even though the Belichick coaching tree until recently hasn't seemed to work out so well in the NFL. But that temptation got them to let go of the only winning coach in recent memory for that franchise. And the reason was 9 wins isn't good enough. 9 wins looks pretty good now to that franchise, I think.
Well, 9 wins wasn't good enough for him because obviously they don't feel that way about everybody because Matt Patricia still wouldn't be there being 13, 27, and 1. All right, that's number one. But number 2, and more importantly, Max, the Detroit Lions haven't won a playoff game since 1991. They've been to the postseason 8 times. So that's doubly bad. Not only have you not won a playoff game since 1991, but it's nearly 30 years and you've made the playoffs 8.